wasn't sure anybody was going to show up this afternoon after a long day, so let's get real. I know I'm the only thing that's between you and your important CEU certificate or that long drive wherever you have to go, so I promise not to bore you with a long speech. I can do it with a short one. Okay. So I've spent enough time in Central Valley to understand that some of you may not think you have a lot in common with the area that I manage in terms of safety and health. So I want to get that out of the way right up front. We do have some things in common. So I know, for example, that you have traffic and vehicle safety concerns. So do we, especially with characters like Goofy. I know that you also have retail stores, places you like to shop. You like antique shopping. We have those sorts of places on our version of Main Street. I know that you all, sorry, I'm getting used to my new clicker here. This is pretty cool. You're all into green and recycling. Hello. So are we. And I know that many of you like to take ventures and you're involved with agriculture. We have horticulture. I know you like to go and head to the mountains. We have a large mountain range where we are. Come on. Maybe you like to get wet river rafting. A little bit more exciting of a space mountain ride, but I think the question is, how does Mickey do it in a place like that? And so one of the ways that I think we have to think about not only safety in a theme park environment and how you manage safety in a place like the Magic Kingdom, let alone your place, is to really think about leadership and really understand what is it that your organization does and how do you and your role in safety and health, how do you fit into that and how do you leverage that and make sure that you're doing everything you can and should be to ensure a safe and healthy workplace for your employees. So I like to think about it this way. So how many people have been to a Disney theme park? Okay, this is good. When you go to those theme parks, what's your favorite attraction? What do you like to do? Just shout it out. Pirates of the Caribbean, Space Mountain, Fireworks, Ride the Matterhorn, Tower of Terror. Okay, let me ask you to think about it this way. How many of you remember the days before there was a Disney's California Adventure Park? Okay, and those with your hands up, what was out there before that park was built? It was just a parking lot. So I remember that. And I remember parking in the lot, and I remember these yellow and blue trams that would snake their way all the way around the parking spaces and eventually pick you up, whisk you and your family up to the main entrance, and you'd roll out, buy your ticket, and visit the park. Now I want you to think about this. So let's say you've loaded up the family, you've headed down south from Bakersfield, you've got your SUV full of everyone. Now you pull into that parking lot, the yellow and blue tram picks you up and you sneak your way up to the main entrance. It drops you off and you walk up and it says, "Welcome to Disneyland. Space Mountain is closed." Now I'd just like to know how many are still going to visit the park that day. Okay, well, you've made a long drive from Bakersfield, so you're gonna gut it out, right? You're gonna take that chance that it's still gonna be a great day. How about you do that same thing? You've piled everybody in the SUV, you've headed down south, you've parked, you've ridden that yellow and blue tram, it snaked its way to the main entrance, and you got off, and along the side of the ticket booth it says, "Welcome to Disneyland. Main Street Emporium is closed. Can't do any shopping for souvenirs on Main Street." Too funny. How many are still going to visit the park? Okay. All right, now let me ask it this way. So you've loaded up your family, maybe you've taken 2 SUVs, you've headed all the way down to Southern California, you've parked, you've jumped into that yellow and blue tram, you've sneaked your way through the park, it dumped you out right at the main entrance, you walk up to the side, and you see along the side of the ticket booth it says, "Welcome to Disneyland. This park is unsafe." How many people are going to visit the park that day? Okay, that's what we're talking about. That's the kind of environment that we're in. It's all about brand. It's really all about you as guests and ensuring that not only you, but our cast members who are working in our parks are able to do everything that we can and should be to ensure that you have a safe and healthy experience. So to me, and we're talking about leadership today, to me, it's really about leadership of the organization. Safety leadership is one thing, but I think we've all encountered situations where we may be doing the right things, we've identified the right codes or the right best practices, but we're just not able to get the kind of traction that we need in order to implement robust, effective, deep diving safety and health programs. I think it starts with leadership. It starts with a leader who's committed, who understands what their business is all about. For us, of course, it's Walt Disney. And Walt had a few things to say, of course, about the entire theme park business and studios and motion pictures. But here's some of the things that he said as really it relates to Disneyland Park. And of course, this is prior to 1955 as he's building things. He says that you can dream, create, design, and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it requires people to make the dream a reality. So even though we all go to Disneyland and we love the rides, we love the shows, we love the horticulture displays, I think mostly what I hear when I talk to people is that the thing that they valued most out of their whole visit was their engagement and interaction with our cast members, our employees. So I think Walt recognized that, and he said then that we train them to be aware that they're mainly to help the guest. And while every cast member has a role, and some of them have stories to tell, and some of them have spiels to give, let's say while they're driving you around the Jungle Cruise, they're really there for you. And then lastly, just to think about the whole overall environment, I don't know if anybody knows sort of Walt's thinking and what ultimately led him to build Disneyland, but Sundays, as he used to say, were Dad's days with his two daughters. And he tried to find places he could take them around in Southern California, and there wasn't really too much that was offered. And so that's what kind of inspired him to think and create and design and build Disneyland Park. And his wife Lillian asked him this question here. She says, Walt says, when I started on Disneyland, my wife used to say, but why do you want to build an amusement park? They're so dirty. And of course his response was, that's the point, mine won't be. And so one of the things that he did in order to really set this stage was really clearly articulate what the role in the show is for all of us as cast members. Now, some of that is language and terminology. In fact, I learned earlier today, and I'm going to have to ask Lynn if she's here to correct me, or some of you, I learned that roads and avenues mean different things, and I think that's in application to oil fields, and if that's not correct, somebody can correct me, but terminology is really important, because I imagine if somebody said, meet me on such and such a road, and you understood it to mean avenue, you'll probably never come together for that important meeting. Well, likewise, terminology in our business is important. We all, as cast members, that's our term for an employee, we all have a role in the show. Some of us are working on stage, and some of us work backstage. When you come to visit one of the Disney theme parks, you're interacting most regularly with an on-stage cast member. They've got a costume that they have to wear, and they're working in the front of the house. Now, believe it or not, I'm in costume today. This happens to be our back-of-house costume or otherwise known as business casual, but we all have a particular role and a particular set of requirements that we have to follow. And that starts with Walt's vision. Walt knew that the entire experience was all about a show. And that show wasn't just the well-constructed venues, it wasn't the well-designed architecture, it wasn't the paint, it wasn't the costumes, it really was all about the people and everything that brings that together. Now, in the, I'm not sure if you can read it here, but in the mid-60s, Walt started writing letters to new cast members as they would come on board, and it was sort of the beginnings of something called the Disney University, and it was really how we would educate cast members as they came in and really understand what their role in the show was and what was expected of them. And so he wrote this letter, which you can see at the bottom, even back in the mid-60s, he's writing to them and telling them that it's vitally important all of us thoroughly understand our responsibility, particularly our responsibility for guest relations and safety. So the thought here is that your organization also has some sort of a history and an understanding, and your leaders, it's not just about us in safety and health, but your leaders, your executives, your CEOs, have a vision about safety. Now, they may not have articulated it, but they've got a vision about it. And I think one of the roles that we have in safety and health is to really help them articulate that and help them express that in a way that really makes sense to those who are working for them, and ultimately all of us who are helping them try to achieve whatever their vision is for success in whatever particular industry or slice of business that you happen to be associated with. So in our organization, what we've done in the last, say, dozen years is we've taken that legacy of a commitment to safety, and I'll talk a little bit about it's one of 4 components that we call the 4 keys, or the Disney quality standards. And we've used that to help leverage and create a safety culture. And I have this photo of a custodial cast member. If you've been in the parks, you've seen them. They're the cast members that are in white. And they actually fulfill a number of really key roles. But one of the interesting things about the custodial cast, and ultimately the whole commitment to cleanliness, and one of the things that you may have noticed as a guest, but it's certainly noticeable to any new cast member, is the commitment to cleanliness. And I can remember my first days in the park back in '99. I had the good fortune of being mentored by somebody who'd been with the organization going on 30 years. And on day 0.5, we were taking a walk through Disneyland Park down Main Street, and sure enough, there's a piece of trash down on the ground. And we're just walking along, or at least I was, and then I noticed that my mentor was several paces behind me, and he bent down to scoop up that piece of trash. And being the new guy, I said, this must be important. Let me ask him, what's that all about? Do we all just pick up trash? Because I thought that's what these cast members were for. And his response to me was, he says, no, everybody who's on stage is expected to not only pick up trash, but then he pulled out one of these reference guides that has all the information about what time the 4 o'clock parade is, where are the restrooms, when does Mickey make his appearances, what are the times of the various restaurants. If you're on stage and you have one of these badges on that has your first name, like Bob, and somebody comes up and says, I need to find the nearest restroom, you're expected to know where that is, or what time the parade is, or where the fireworks will be. And so a lot of that is really captured in the role of these custodial cast members, because they're out there all the time, and they're not just sort of pinned down to one attraction or one food location or one retail venue. They're all over the particular land or area to which they're assigned. And so because of that, not only are they out there sweeping and dumping trash and moving trash from on stage to backstage, they're interacting with you as a guest. Because very likely you've asked one of those cast members, what time is the parade? Where's the restroom? Do you have an extra guide map so I can find my way around the park? And that's really part of their role. And in those days when I was new, we were looking at that as really an example of what culture can do. So culture around trash, we said, is the same kind of idea that we want to build around safety, that it's just second nature, that everybody's accountable for safety. And ultimately, we developed a brand around what you see here, safety begins with me. It's everybody's accountability and responsibility. And in the last year, as we've revisited our commitment to safety, yet again, we've added the notion that safety begins with me, and therefore no one gets hurt. And so it's all about accountability and responsibility that starts with a vision like what Walt set out, what is reinforced today, a commitment by our mid-level leaders and the cast, and ultimately everybody to this vision that no one gets hurt, and ultimately a culture of safety. So these are the 4 keys. And as I mentioned, these have been really embedded into the operation of the park from the very beginning. In the earliest days, it was pretty much the same as you see here. It was safety, courtesy, show, and capacity. So we were concerned about throughput and the ability of the rides to carry a number of guests and make sure that the efficiencies, without saying the term, that the efficiencies that we needed were being met. But they were always listed this way. They were always in this order. And the conversation started just as you saw with the letter, that it's all about safety. So if you go back to that sort of this park is unsafe example, and you think about that kind of situation possibly happening, if you as a guest, and let alone us as employees or cast members, don't really believe that our workplace is safe, or that the place that you want to go and have a great time and to prepare memories and experience fun times with your family, if you don't believe that that's safe, if you don't think you're going to successfully make it through the Pirates of the Caribbean, or get off the Matterhorn safely, or get out of Fantasmic without having a problem, then you're probably certainly not going to enjoy that opportunity, and you're not going to come to the park. And that, of course, is bad news. That doesn't meet with our business model. So we want you to feel safe. We want you to have an experience that is certainly likely to entice you to come back. And part of the way that we do that is by then delivering on these other elements of the overall show. The next being courtesy. So every time you interact with a cast member, hopefully you're having a positive exchange, you're getting your questions answered, you're receiving the right level of service, your order for food is correct, all those important things to you as a guest. They, as a cast member, have to remember and be sure that they're staying sort of in show, that they're preserving the magic, they're not letting the things go that are important to everybody as a guest, and that they understand what their role in the show is, that they dress appropriately, they use the proper terminology, and they know about all the inner workings of the particular venue where they are. And that they do so and they operate in an efficient manner. So we're not wasting time, we're not wasting resources, we're making good use of our resources and doing that in a way, again, that delights you as a guest. So when I think about this and really thinking about leadership, to me, it's not exactly hard, but it does take work. And the things that I've picked up in about a dozen-year career at Disney is just that, is it takes work, and it's really been valuable for me, and I'd really have to believe it's valuable to you and your organization to really understand what are the origins of your company. Now, some of your companies may not have the benefit of a 55-plus year history that Disney does, but I'll bet you've got something. You've got a founder or a co-founder or two people who came together and built something or started something. And I believe that as part of really delivering a solid safety message and a vision and ultimately leading safety, it's really important to understand what some of those fundamental principles are. Get to know your leaders. If you're in safety and health and you're not spending time with leaders, whether they be the next level up or leaders of your operation or overall leaders of your business, you're missing an opportunity. Because again, as we said, those leaders, if you're in an organization that's kind of struggling with safety, those leaders probably have a vision. It's likely that they want to improve. They just don't know how to articulate it. We do, right? This is what we do for a living. We understand what safety and health is all about, why it's important to an organization, and the benefits that can come from that. And I think with each of you interacting with those leaders, you can have the success with them and be able to articulate or help them articulate what that vision is. If they are talking about it, what is it that they're saying about safety? Do they understand? Do they understand cost-benefit analysis? Do they understand risk analysis? Do they understand insurance? How premiums are set if you're in an insured situation? I think all these things are important, and again, we're perfectly situated as safety and health professionals to help push that dialogue. And then I think also it's important from our perspective to understand how work gets done. I said follow the money, and I think that's one of the misses as safety and health professionals, is we're not exactly sure how the money flows in our organization. I've run across many who are really frustrated by the fact that their particular important, probably hugely successful safety initiative will work if only they could get it funded. And they don't really know who to talk to about selling that as an important investment so that it can get the kind of interest that we need from those same business leaders to really make those investments in safety and ultimately make the kind of changes that you're looking for. In fact, it was interesting, I had dinner with some folks from your chapter last night, and I think it was Mike was talking about some investments from one of the petrochemical companies that led to a number of field safety people who are out in all of the oil fields, and it sounded like it was almost a slam dunk the way it was presented, where they were talking about needing millions of dollars to fund resources to put people out in the field so that you could hit every site and perhaps touch every employee every day. Well, that's not cheap. Labor's not cheap. And in order to sell that, Mike or whoever it was that made that case had to really understand cost of labor, your resources, your other expense dollars around vehicle costs and fuel costs, and really sell that investment and really talk about what could happen if you invest that kind of money when it comes to savings on the workers' comp side, savings on your insurance side, ultimately savings in human resources. So, and then lastly, I think, again, it's really important to understand what is your role. I much would prefer to be the partner rather than the enforcer. Does anybody agree with that? Yeah, being the cop is really no fun, whereas if you can get out there and, again, if you understand the business and you know how to help problem solve, you can really help those leaders in the area really make a difference and really enhance their safety for their employees. So some of the things that we've done at Disney, and this is just sort of a random sampling of things that I thought you might be interested in. I'm more than happy to talk about almost anything that would be of interest to you. One of the things that we do, and you might be interested to know, when we go to build a ride, this is a little bit old, but when we built Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters, it had to be sort of crammed into an existing Tomorrowland structure that previously held Circle Vision Theater, and just after that it had a portion of the old Rocket Rods attraction that meandered through it. And Rocket Rods, some of you may know, died kind of a horrible death. It just wasn't fun or easy to maintain, so everybody said, we need to do something else in that part of the park. So Buzz Lightyear is what's in there, and the process to build that attraction, really much like any other attraction, is really governed and driven by our partners up at Walt Disney Imagineering. An Imagineer is a Disney term for an engineer with a little bit of pixie dust and some creative juices flowing. But this is the process that they follow. Every ride, every show, every food venue, every store, everything that goes on in the park really starts as if you were getting ready to build or create a movie. And the reason that is because Walt, before he was a theme park operator, was a movie maker. And in making movies, everything is all about the story. And you have to start with a storyboard and tell the story in pictures, and then Walt would animate it and add voices and whatnot. So that eventually evolved into what now we call kind of this blue sky process, which is Imagineers and others sitting in rooms not unlike this one, where everybody just starts to throw out ideas. Drawings are created, sometimes on the back of a napkin. Sometimes we're able to get a good artist and come in and do some preliminary drawings and create things. But it all starts with, an idea. And from that blue sky, we move into, probably like virtually everybody else in this room, your organization has to design and engineer something. You've got to move into manufacturing and production, the installation, and then we kind of come to a slow stop where we do this thing we call test and adjust. And some of you who have visited the park may have had the bonus of actually coming upon an attraction that hasn't officially opened yet, but you've been invited to ride this attraction. And what you're doing is you're actually participating in the very tail end of that test and adjust period. So we've gone through all the evaluation that we need to do to be sure that it meets all of our standards, it meets any of the consensus standards that we abide by, and we're ready to open it to guests. It's just not ready for all the pomp and circumstance that we like to do around grand opening things. So you got a little treat if you were able to ride Goofy's Sky School over at Disney California Adventure maybe in the last several months, or the Adventures of the Little Mermaid over there. From there, then, we move into a process that we call operational excellence, and this is where the handoff takes place from our Imagineering process to us as park operators owning that attraction and operating it and sustaining that, and then just putting that into the regular attraction and entertainment menu. And operational excellence for us means that if there's something that you want in the way of performance at the end, then you have to start at the beginning, and we have this model called an S-curve, and it's a real simple 4-step curve where you start with your source content. And so for operating an attraction, our source content is what you would probably call an SOP. We call it an operating guide or an OG. And that OG lays out what the attraction operators have to do every time we load guests into a vehicle and dispatch them into the attraction. Walks them through step by step, do this, say this, check the seat restraints, get a thumbs up, make sure all the lights and everything on the dispatch console are correct, hit go, and we repeat the process again. So that source content leads to training content, and we're an organization because of the numbers. We have some 20,000 cast members just in Anaheim, and about probably 2,000 of those are attraction operators. So we have a train the trainer model. So we take experienced operators, we give them some enhanced training, and then they're training the follow-on cast members who come on to work that role. So they work their training guide, deliver it in an on-the-job training situation. You all probably do OJT in your organization, and you show people how to do the work that they might have read about as they were coming in. And then once we've trained them, we go through a reinforcement process where they're tested. They're given a written test, and they're also asked to demonstrate their knowledge via a performance assessment. So they have to demonstrate to one of these trainers that they got all the steps correct and could dispatch that vehicle the way it's supposed to. And then on the back side of that, we have a regular audit process which actually has 3 different tiers. So we have a location audit. They're auditing themselves. They've got little checklists that they use every morning before we open the attraction. They have to go through and make sure that the track is clear, that everything is the way it's supposed to be. And then the second half of that is an observational excellence checklist where they're actually watching how a particular cast member interacts with you as guests and loads the vehicles, and as in any traditional observation and feedback process, then we give them coaching and success feedback afterwards. So that gives us confidence that every time you get on one of those attractions, you're going to be treated the right way, you're going to be seated the right way, you're going to make it through that attraction, and you can have the confidence that you want to be able to successfully experience that ride. Now, some of the things aren't so obvious. When you come into the park, how many pick up a park map? Those that didn't raise their hand, you must be routine visitors. You already know your way around. Okay, good. If you've ever actually dived into that map, it's got a lot of information for you. Now, there's a lot of information that's about how to have a great experience, right? Where's the fast pass location? Where are the restrooms? Important information like that. But there's also a lot of information around safety, in particular for our guests who have disabilities, how they can have a like experience even though they may not have sort of all the capabilities that the rest of us have. And then we just move on through the end of the process where we maintain safety. It's an everyday part of our business, particularly in attractions. And the oversight and compliance work is done by organizations like mine who interact with our operators on a daily basis and make sure that any issues or needs that come up, we're able to handle that. And we have safety committees like you probably have. We have regular monthly meetings like you all have. We have communication bulletin boards. You all have those. Ours happen to have a Mickey here and there, but it's all the same kind of information. What's the important safety matter for that particular business? We have a lot of food and beverage operations. It's a big concern for us, and we've spent a lot of time, not just as the Anaheim operation, but domestically partnering with our partners in Walt Disney World to create what we really believe is a world-class approach to food safety and public health. Again, just like the bad experience on an attraction, you can imagine if we were to have a foodborne illness or an outbreak of some kind or a health problem over at one of the hotels, that doesn't look good in the Orange County Register or the New York Times or anywhere else where those things tend to pop up. So we have to go through a lot of measures to make sure that food is handled appropriately, and one of the things that we've adopted is HACCP. It's a technique used in most food manufacturing. If you're in ag and food manufacturing, you're probably familiar with it, but it's basically understanding where are those opportunities for the wee beasties to get into the food that we eat, and making sure that you're taking care of controlling those critical points and doing the right things right. So some food that you may hold warm or hot has to be held at certain temperatures. Likewise, cold food needs to be held at a certain temperature or below. Got to cook things thoroughly. We've all been beaten to death over the head with the information about cooking poultry. If you cook it and you store it and then you reheat it, there's certain rules that you have to follow. And probably the most important thing is hand washing. It's one of those simple behavioral things, but hand washing and the inappropriate use of towels in a kitchen can get you in more trouble possibly than some of those other things. So again, it's just an example of something that we've adopted that you know, we're confident is the right approach. It needs to be done. It's not really required by the health department, but it really is something that we know really helps ensure that the experience that you have is what you want. Emergency response, no, they don't come from the fire department on Main Street, but we do have an incident command system. Those of you who are in chemical or petrochemical business out here, you know about that stuff really well. I probably don't need to go into too much, but if something happens, we've got a rallying point behind Main Street where we can pull our executives together, and we've got a whole emergency operations center, and we can connect to corporate offices up in Burbank. We can connect with Walt Disney World or any of the other global operations if it becomes something that's that big. But locally, we've got trained cast members, leaders who on a daily basis, they're probably the stage manager for let's say the day shift of the operation of Disneyland Park. But if something were to go down, they, like many of you, have a different hat that they can put on and begin orchestrating the work that needs to be done to lead a UICT. Unlike our friends at Walt Disney World, we're right smack in the middle of the city of Anaheim, so we have to partner real closely with Anaheim Police Department and the fire department. In fact, it's so close that we have a detective on property and we have paramedics on property just in the event that something goes wrong, and response time is really critical. So those are three things that I thought I would share in addition to talking a little bit about leadership. That's kind of it for me. So if you've got questions about what's going on at the happiest place on earth, I'd love to try to answer those for you.
You have a lot of seasonal people, and do these people come back each year? And then that's part of the question. Or the second part would be, what is your orientation for safety for those seasonal people?
Yeah, so it's a great question. He's asking if what is the seasonal employment like for Disneyland, and then how do we train and orient people as they come on board? And so, yeah, it is seasonal. As you can imagine, not unlike agriculture, you know, there's certain seasons to when you come to the park. You all like to come at the holidays, and then you don't come after January, and then you come around spring break, and then it kind of dies off, and then summer hits, and then it's just nuts until Labor Day. And so with that, we have a hiring cycle that starts before the holidays so that we have enough people on board to handle all of you, and then another little season just after January, and then a really big season just ahead of the summer. And every time we hire, whether it's part-time, temporary, or full-time cast members, all of them go through the same training journey. And when you come to Disney to work, your first training experience is something we call traditions, or welcome to show business, and it's really all pixie dust and welcome to entertainment, and here's how you put on a good show. But unbeknownst to the attendees, there's little bits of pixie dust that actually contain safety messages in there. And so we're telling them from day one that, hey, you know, you work for an organization that is really committed to your safety. There's not a lot of meat that we can give them in about a 6-hour experience, but every one of them, based on whatever, you know, we talked about roles in the show. So if you're an attractions cast member, your journey after traditions might look slightly different from the journey that a food and beverage cast member is going to take after their traditions. So attractions cast members have to learn kind of that S-curve model that we talked about. In food and beverage, it's a little different, because not only do they have to learn how to prep and serve food, but part of the preparation and serving of food has to embed food safety, right? We have to show them about how to properly wash their hands and where the restrooms are and all the importance of those things. So there's different journeys that each of these cast members take as they come on board. Yes, in the back.
Can you talk a little bit about, I don't, maybe it is a different model or not, but parade safety? The stuff that we don't see, and that's what I'm always interested in is, I mean, there's a lot of safety for the employees, and there's plenty of people following and monitoring, but it's really twofold. You're keeping your people safe in the parade, we're on stilts and everything else, and then the people along the sides.
Sure. So, for those of you who've been to the park and have attended a parade, let's start with you as a guest. So if you could see up here, the carpet comes right to an edge with the tile that leads back to the kitchen here. Well, for most of us, that's just a decorative feature. For us, that actually is a marking. And so when we get ready to launch the 4 o'clock parade, you'll notice cast members are coming out. They may be putting down tape of some kind that, you know, you don't know how in the world could they possibly follow that map, but it's actually laid down for them. They just have to add the tape, or we're putting out stanchions and ropes and lines to make sure you know as a guest where you should be. And then we have a number of cast members who are sprinkled around both before as well as during the parade to make sure that you stay where you need to be. But it's also, again, a visual for our performers as they go along the parade route. Whether they're a dancer or a jumping stilt walker or somebody riding a bike or even a float driver, they've all got their visual cues as they go along the parade route, and they know where they need to be in relationship to certain marks and certain designations all along the route. I mean, there's a whole host of rules. Fall protection is a challenge for us when it comes to entertainment in particular, and parades especially. It's like a stage on wheels. Who knew such a thing existed? But we have to work it out and make sure that when Mickey is on top of the float, that if you didn't know, he's actually tied in. He rides on what everybody in the business calls a Barbie pole. It's just a pole that anchors back into the structure of the float. It's got a belt around him, and there he stays put, so we don't have any Mickeys falling off the parade float. That would be a bad show. We have a lot of rules backstage as we're getting ready to, just before parade step off. There's a whole area around the floats as the floats are being loaded, and we have our performers or dancers who may be on the ground. There's rules about how much space we have to allow between the floats. We've got rules about not crossing between floats that may be linked via tow bars, and certainly no crossing between floats as they're in motion. So. I mean, tons and tons of things to go through. In fact, one of the things that we do for parade floats is we have a warehouse, we have a self-retracting lanyard anchored up in the ceiling, and we'll even practice emergency egress out of the floats, especially certainly the taller ones, but doing so in a way so that as somebody's trying to scamper down something that's not designed to be climbed on, that they can do so, and if they happen to lose their grip, all that they're going to do is just exercise the SRL and come down to the ground. So I could go on, but there's lots and lots of things that go on with parades, and the whole entertainment venue is fireworks and the World of Color show and all the interaction. We've got lasers and isopar and fireworks and shooting fountains. I mean, it's incredible. What else? Yes?
So, do you have crews that come in, like, when the park closes to garden and all that kind of stuff?
No, it just maintains itself. No, just kidding. Yes, as you're heading down if you're heading down Main Street away from the castle, you can't see it, but back here there's a horticulture cast member coming in just after park closes. You don't see him, but he's headed off to some flower bed somewhere. He's got to do something. Likewise, there's a painter that has to come out and fix the painting somewhere. Sometimes you run into these people during the day. They're out on Main Street painting railings. We were talking before the session began. Some of that work, it's not too terribly obstructive, and in fact, our folks on the maintenance and engineering side kind of think that it's good for them to be out there also as part of the show to help you understand that, yeah, sometimes, you know, Main Street gets dirty or something gets broken or something has to be repainted or touched up, and so we let them out and to make sure that they're following the right safety rules and all that. Yes, sir.
One of our processes that we use frequently here in the Valley to stop work authority should we see something that's unsafe or at risk is that exercised within the Disney organizations?
Yeah, yes, it is actually. We have a process that's used mostly by our engineering services group, the folks that maintain and do all the mechanical work. They call it timeout. In fact, they have a little card. If the cast member feels strongly that they actually have to play the card and call timeout, but that's rare. In fact, I'm not even sure I've ever heard anybody use it. But it was just a symbol to do exactly what you're describing, where if as a cast member in whatever work that you're doing, you are uncomfortable with what you perceive to be, whether it's real or not, a safety concern, you've got certainly every authority to call a timeout and make sure that the right people get with you and get around that particular condition, and that we can do what we need to change it so that the work can proceed. So yeah, I guess I didn't say this, but sometimes it is a workplace, and a lot of the same mechanisms that are just routine use in all of our different applications of safety, whether you're in agriculture or petroleum or retail or anything else, we're using them. They might sound different. They might have, you know, a little ruffle and flourish here, but it's all the same stuff. And I have to tell you, it works. You know, it works in your organization. It works in ours. I think the challenge, as I was saying before, is getting the traction, and in particular, if you're in an organization or a portion of your organization that just doesn't get it, you know, that's when we have to kind of put our leadership stuff into play and really apply all the best practices and some of these other techniques that we talked about before. Way in the back.
What's the size of your safety staff?
The safety organization at Disneyland is approximately 30 cast members, and of those 30, about 25 of us are safety professionals. Many have CSPs. I have a CIH on my team. I've got 2 CPEs. We have an RN, an ARM, 2 ARMs. And then we have a sister organization, of course, that's doing the same kind of work that we're doing out in Orlando, and they're about 43 in size, kind of a similar mix of designations.
If I follow up question,
Sure.
do you give most of these staff safety professionals, do they grow within the organization? Do you pull from within, or do you go outside?
We in California, we grew significantly in the early 2000s, and we did one of these, let us show you the return on investment by hiring safety and health people, and actually we secured about 16 new positions. As they were coming on board, we also worked with our operations group, so the attractions business and the entertainment business and the food and beverage business. We asked them if they could identify safety coordinators, people with whom we could work, who really knew the business, who knew the contacts, and while we know safety, we think partnering with them is really the best of all possible worlds to make sure that we're not implementing something that just won't work in a theme park environment. And so several of those were salaried leaders who came right out of the operation. And then more recently, actually, we started bringing in hourly cast members who've been with us 1 to 5 years and kind of developing them a little bit. We have, you know, we're pretty fortunate. We've got a good available resource when it comes to training and education, and so we're able to build them up a little bit, send them off-site if we need to. We try to send them to ASSE when we can, and really try to, it's really a balance, trying to grow from within and make sure that if that expertise or slice of experience that we need isn't available, then we'll go out and we'll hire it from the outside. There's a guy, there he is.
Something I didn't hear mentioned all was, do you guys run into confined spaces, lockout, tagout, energy control, you know, high voltage, low voltage, and anything?
Yes, we absolutely do all of that. We have vaults. We have a grain silo over in California Adventure. Certainly is a confined space. There's a lot of pits, a lot of equipment that operates in a traction, actually operates under the floor that you probably see when you're riding or walking around. So a lot of that stuff may not be a permit required space, but we still treat it, of course, with the right respect that it needs. We're a huge user of electricity. We don't generate it, but you know, we're right there at the transition from Edison to our place, so we've got a lot of electrical concerns. We've just finished, actually. We haven't. I won't say we're completely on board with 70E, but we understand 70E really well. We've made applications of that in our environment that makes sense, and we've done studies on the equipment, so we know what the hazard ratings are, and have provided labeling and all the PPE and the training and everything that everybody has. Lockout, tagout, if you think about an attraction and you were to look again under those floorboards, you'd see just, you know, a myriad of pumps and motors and more motors and more motors and chain drives and everything that you can imagine. And so that, of course, requires the same lockout, tagout procedure that you're using in your factories and your other environments. The challenge for us is to get a cast member safely from, let's say, outside of the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad ride path, either onto or over the ride path and into the center of the attraction where some of this equipment may be. So we've created a thing that feels and sort of sounds like lockout, tagout, but we're really trying to make sure that, you know, these two things are not confused. We call it ride access control, and it's a way that we achieve accountability and responsibility for who goes into our attraction buildings, and that way we always know before we start to cycle vehicles that everybody's cleared out of the space and they've all been accounted for before we go to start that ride. There's somebody over here. Yeah.
We talked about leadership setting the tone. So for your operations group but not safety, what type of leadership training or safety training do the operational leaders do?
It's a great question and really timely, because when we started, I had mentioned we'd kind of gone through and reassessed this long-standing commitment to safety, and that was actually one of the areas where we thought we could do better, was to really more actively engage our leaders. So the president of the Disneyland Resort and the vice president who's in charge of Disneyland Park, and he's got several general managers that are running all of their different operations. They've all spent hours and hours with some of us from safety and health, really understanding what it means to lead a culture of safety. And they get it. I mean, they're not experts, of course, like us, but they get it to the point where the conversations that sometimes can be rough when you're trying to implement a new initiative or make a change or do something that's going to require an update to training of thousands of people. Those are big decisions, but they're easier conversations. You know, it gets down to not the why do we have to do this. It's okay, that makes sense. How will we get it done? And that's a much different conversation from trying to have these arguments of, well, I don't think it's important. Well, it's important. Well, it's required or it's not required, and that's just not the game that we want to be in. So that, in fact, has taken off so much that those same leaders now are turning around and they're teaching the next layer of leadership what it means to lead a culture of safety. And so we've got, of course, a lot of tools and products that we're able to create in our training environment that they're able to deliver. I think there was one more somewhere in here. Did you have a question?
I was curious how you instill and maintain the attitude in your employees to not walk past the piece of trash on the ground.
We're still working on that. But what we do know is it's culture, and it's about not walking by things. And if leaders are bending down to pick up a piece of trash or a bottle or whatever it may be, you know, you've seen that commercial, you know, where somebody opens the door for somebody, and it's like, you know, and so on and so on and so on. So I'm convinced that's really how it happens. I mean, somewhere, you know, when it's more important, we have to put in procedures and we have to do formal training and all these sorts of things. But the little things, or maybe the not so little things, like creating a culture, ensuring that people know you care, is actually pretty easy, and it's really easy if you've got that leadership level engaged and they're doing the kinds of things like stepping down to pick up a piece of trash.
Big round of applause.